I should say, to begin with, as Chris sort of alluded to, we are No More Robots is a PC and console publisher. So if anybody is waiting for sort of mobile tips, I think a lot of what I'm about to talk about can kind of cross over to mobile, but there'll be certain points as well where you'll kind of think to yourself, this is nothing to do with mobile. So apologies for that. You'll just have to sort of work out which is useful for you. So essentially, the situation right now is that, especially again, in PC and console, games are simply not selling as they were before. It was already difficult to sell games, if we're honest. It's always been a tricky business. But particularly now, it is becoming just near impossible, or so it seems. There are plenty of people who are still having success, don't get me wrong, but in general, it is, the murmurings are that people are finding it harder and harder to actually find any success. So essentially what I'm going to try to do here is No More Robots has been doing decently. We've been managing to make games sell, especially on PC. So I kind of been invited along to throw a whole ton of knowledge at you regarding what exactly it is that we're doing right. So hopefully, at least some of this is going to be useful to you. Hopefully you're going to be able to pluck some of this out and apply it to what you're doing. Quickly before I start, just so you know who the heck I am, my name is Mike Rose. I run publishing label No More Robots. We have published a whole bunch of games over the past 3 years and done pretty well for ourselves. We've done this mountain bike game, Descenders. We've done a alternate reality 90s internet simulator called Hypnospace Outlaw. We've done a sort of kingdom management sim called Yes, Your Grace. We've done a Papers, Please inspired Brexit simulator called Not Tonight. A big sort of reason why I think we've done as well as we have comes down to two main things. We use a lot of data and numbers to make our games sell. And I'm going to kind of go more into that soon. But the other thing as well is that we tend not to do what I think a lot of other kind of developers and publishers do, which is follow trends and try to say, oh, well, this genre is doing well right now. Maybe we should make a game in that genre. As you just heard, all of our games are weird and either don't have a genre or kind of break from the mold. I think that's kind of really important when it's come to why we have done as well as we have, because our games are just different. Again, I'm going to go into this in a second. So essentially, I have tried to distill down what we do into 10 key points. Now, I've got sort of 20 minutes to do this, so I'm going to have to blast through these. A lot of the points I'm about to make, I have talked about publicly in other places, so I'll mention that as well. Wherever there's a point that I'm kind of bringing to you, there will be other resources that I've done where you can delve deeper into that point. All right, let's do this. So the number one thing that I always scream at people, and this works on mobile as well, is what is the hook of your game? I feel like a lot of people say it, but a lot of people just kind of don't understand or don't realize how important this is. With every single No More Robots game, we always have a distinct what is that game about it. So as I just described, if someone says, oh, I was playing that downhill mountain biking game, there's a good chance they're talking about Descenders. If someone says, oh, I was playing that anti-Brexit game, there's a good chance they were talking about Not Tonight. Each of our games has a very distinct thing about it, so that when we describe it publicly, it's very easy to get across what it is and to distinctly say, yes, that must be that game from No More Robots. I think if you are finding that you are talking about your game and you're saying, oh, it's a twin stick shooter and it's it's a roguelike as well, you've just described a million games, if we're honest. there's a million games which are exactly that description. And that is an issue. If you can't distinctly describe what your game is, it's an issue for so many reasons. How are you going to get that across in marketing so that it's distinctly different from everything else? Even when you're talking to platform holders, how are you going to get Xbox or PlayStation excited about your game if they've just seen 2 other games that are literally your game, the elevator pitch for your game that morning? So yeah, this is honestly, I feel like I scream this the most, and that's why I've put this as number 1. This is so important. You need to think about this so hard. What is the hook? Is it exciting enough? Is it distinct enough? I honestly cannot stress this enough, as simple as it sounds. Now, this is the slightly lower down, but still as important thing that I scream at game developers as well. I get pitched games, dozens of games every single day land into my email. And I go through and I find the ones that I find interesting, and then I go to their pitch deck, and I find that the amount of time that they're planning to spend on the game is quite frankly ludicrous. And I've talked to a lot of developers who genuinely believe that a game being longer in development means it's going to be a better game. I've had arguments with people about this where they've said, I'm going to spend an extra year on my game to polish it and make it better. It's just not true. It's just not true. The horror stories I have heard where people spend 5 years on their game, even for me personally, even sort of 2 to 3 years is too long in a game. If you are planning to spend that amount of time making a game, that's okay, that's fair enough. If you really, really feel like that's what you need to do, but at least work out what the logistics of that are. If you are going to spend that amount of time, how much is it going to cost you? And is your game genuinely going to make that back? And that kind of leads into point 3 about being realistic about how your game is going to do. There are so many resources now online showing sales, especially on Steam, but you can also get a lot of data about how games are selling on console as well. I imagine it's the same for mobile as well. You need to be just crazy realistic with yourself and this is sort of this can be applied for when you're starting to make a game, even in the middle of development where you're kind of at a crossroads and you're deciding how much more time you need to put into this thing. You need to be realistic with yourself. If you are spending X amount of time and you are burning through Y amount of money during that time, are you making that money back when the game comes out? How many copies? You can pretty much work out roughly the exact amount of copies that you would need to spend to break even in a lot of these situations. So work that maths out. Work out, are you actually going to break even? I see so many developers just going into it blind, just saying, well, we're going to spend this amount of time, we're going to spend this amount of money, and then hopefully we'll just make that money back. You can work out exactly how many copies you need to sell and how much money you need to spend for this to be okay. And this is what we do constantly. Every time we sign a game and the developer says, I need X amount of funding, we then work out with that developer, okay, if you need this amount of funding, it's going to take this amount of time to earn this money back. Are you going to be okay with that? Are you going to be okay with if it sells this many copies or it sells this many copies? Work all of this data out for yourself, because it will kind of paint you the big picture and make you realize, maybe how much time and money you should be spending on this thing. So now, kind of past all of that, to get more into you've started making the game. So this is more like when No More Robots will come along. This is when we've kind of started to fund the game, and we're now starting to talk to the developer about getting that thing out there. I see developers announcing their title, kind of making it public well too early, over and over again. And the problem with doing that is that, unfortunately, there are sort of algorithms, and there are invisible things like I like to call the hype factor, that you can kind of really come a cropper if you don't think about this kind of stuff. Think about how many games you've seen where they've announced and then 2 years later they're still not out, and kind of no one kind of cares anymore. You hear murmurings every now and again, but and by the time they do come out, then people are like, whoa, did that thing actually come out? because because they've just kind of they've lost that hype factor entirely. People have now moved on to other stuff and have become bored of the thing that you originally talked about 2 years ago. Typically, we will announce games roughly 4 to 8 months before they come out. I find that that is the right amount of time to be able to, kind of do things like gather your Steam wish list, talk to console platforms, etc., but also keep the public kind of hyped about the thing. Most of our most popular games, we just launched this game, Yes, Your Grace, in March, and that's done pretty dang well for us. And we announced that we originally signed it about 1.5 years ago and started funding it then. And then we announced it in October last year, so 6 months before. And then the game's come out and kind of exploded. So you see that you don't need to announce it any earlier than that. There's just no reason. We held on to it secretly for nearly 1 year before then, and it did not hinder the game at all. It meant that the developers could just focus on the game. Because again, as I say at the bottom there, the earlier you announce, the longer you have to be thinking about the marketing, and the longer you've kind of got the stress of people asking, is it out yet? Is it out yet? So you really don't need to. Don't feel pressured that you need to get this thing that you're working on out there. When you do the announcement, please understand, and this might sound obvious, but a lot of people don't kind of get this. The announcement itself and putting that thing public is so important, because this is the moment when all of those various internet algorithms start to pull data about your thing. So as simple as Google spotting it, that if you can nail that announcement and get loads of buzz around it immediately and shoot to the top of Google, that automatically means more people are finding your thing. Similarly on Steam, no one knows how the blessed holy Steam algorithm works exactly, but it has been shown time and time again that if you can funnel a ton of people into your Steam page at the birth of the Steam page, then it will automatically force more eyeballs into that game. It'll show it in the discovery queue, etc., on Steam. So we go very hard on the announcements for our games. We'll spend weeks putting stuff together. The trailers for the games will honestly kind of go through sort of at least a dozen revisions of these trailers. We really go hard on announcements, and of everything. This is your kind of jumping off point. Everything obviously it kind of goes down from there, and then you'd hope boost back up again when the game comes out. But this is the point where you want to build a peak of interest all in one go, kind of throw it all together at the same time. Once we do that, one of the biggest secret weapons for us is what we call the community beta. We essentially do a closed beta where we invite a whole bunch of people from the community to come play the game. It works incredibly for us especially with a PC game. If you kind of do PC games, you'll know that everyone kind of screams all the time about collecting Steam wish lists. Getting wish lists out of this has been amazing for us. You get thousands of people. You invite thousands of people to this beta. They all play it. You kind of beg them to please wish list the game, and it works. People will do that, and you get boosted numbers. And again, as I've kind of mentioned, this holy Steam algorithm, it notices that. So if you kind of announce your game and a month or two later do this beta, it kind of, by the time the algorithm has started to drop you off again since your announcement, it boosts you back up again, and all of a sudden you're getting more organic views from Steam. So it really, really helps to run this beta, and and other than on the marketing side of it, you get a ton of feedback as well. It really helps to shape what's kind of the final game is going to look like. This is what I live by just in my life generally. And again, I think it's a reason why everything that No More Robots does is honestly so cheap. And sometimes when we're working with developers, I see them saying like, oh, but if we're not spending loads of money on this thing and that thing, that's what everyone else is doing, right? It must be the way that it's meant to be done. And I can honestly tell you, it is not at all. We spend barely any money on anything. We we don't. I've started doing some paid ads recently, but barely any, and only on Reddit. We have never done paid ads before that, and we have been going to shows as well. But I decided recently, well, we can't go to shows right now, only because of what's kind of going on in the world. But I've kind of decided that I think we're probably not going to do that many extra shows. I think a lot of indie developers especially think they need to be going to shows, having a booth, etc. And I cannot tell you how much money is funneled into doing that. Flying over to shows, flying a team to show, buying all of the stuff, buying the monitors and the laptops, etc. They're so expensive to go to. And do you really see anything from them in the end? A lot of the time, the answer is no. That's not to say they're not useful for everybody. But these kind of questions are the kind of things you should be asking yourself, because at the end of the day, it's coming out of the end. At the end when the game comes out, everything that you spent needs to then come back out. You need to make that back. So you really need to be thinking to yourself, is it worth me doing this? Because a lot of the time the answer is no, and it's what we live by, and it's been working for us. A lot of what I've been talking about has been trying to kind of build stats. We have a lot of different stats that we follow, and they can help to determine, they can help to show you before your game comes out how it's going to do. Again, wish lists on Steam, everyone talks about them. They help so much because you get an actual idea of, you're not just hoping that it's going to do okay. You kind of get there, you kind of get to your launch, and we can always roughly guess how our games are going to do because of wish lists. On Switch, we've started to put titles on Switch, and it's become increasingly obvious to me that pre-orders before a Switch launch are incredibly important, because when you launch, pre-orders on Switch count towards day one sales, which boosts you up the charts. It's things like this, finding out, there's so much data online about what are the important numbers, and working out what these stats are so that you have a goal to work towards can really sort of inform everything that you do, especially kind of marketing and publishing wise. Now, a big thing that I see happening is that once a game launches, kind of regardless of how it does, whether it does well or maybe not so, a lot of developers kind of get to the end, they kind of do a big sigh, big breathe out, and then they kind of don't do the things that need to happen after then. Right after the launch, I would argue is one of the most critical times, because that's the time, again, I know I keep saying it, but it's the time when algorithms are deciding to care about you or not. It's when on Steam, the client is trying to decide whether or not people care about your game. The more that you push and push and push in the weeks that follow, it might not feel like it's doing anything, but a lot of the time it is. Begging people for user reviews, going on the Steam forums and trying to answer as many support questions as possible, just sending codes out to YouTubers. Even if you send out 200 codes, 2 YouTubers play the game off of that. It's a ton of work, but it can be useful. We see YouTuber spiked all the time these days. So yeah, this is a crucial time, and it's a time when you really need to be trying to take a deep sigh, but then get back straight on it, because it's just so important. And the main thing through all of this, and especially after the game has launched, is to just try to... The thing that happens to every single person involved in games, not just the developer, it happens to me as well after we publish a game, is that you will feel like crap. It happens to everybody. I have honestly not met a single developer who straight after they've launched a game, regardless of how well it's done, is like, wow, that was great. I'm so happy that happened. I'm really happy now. Most people feel like death straight afterwards. The thing to remember is that everyone feels like that, and to remember that you now have a game out there, and that is amazing. And there are so many things that you can now do with that. Once you have your game out there, there's just so many potential things you can do. We've had games where, they're on PC, they've done fine, but the developer kind of wished that they'd done better. And then months later, we've then gone and put console ports out. And those console ports do just as well as the PC version. And all of a sudden, the developer's in a position where they're like, wow, this has crept up on me a bit, but I'm really happy with how this has gone. And when I kind of look back over it, just getting that game out is such an achievement. And I feel like we kind of don't talk about it enough. It's amazing to do that. And there's just, once you've done that, there's so many ways you can go with it. So you need to have a little cry, have a little cry after you release the game, but then kind of remember this. It's something that you're going to be able to kind of push for the rest of your life at that point. Right. Well, I just blasted through 10 points as quickly as I could. Hopefully at least some of that was useful. And that's it. Thanks, Chris.
Well, completely useless, Mike. Waste of time. No, it was really good. It was really good. Really good, Mike. Loads of stuff crammed in there. It's my favourite sort of presentation, so it's great. Well, I'll try and get in a couple of questions. We're late, but it's not really your fault. In many ways, it's more my fault.
Did I go over?
Let's blame the previous. No, you were perfect. I started you late, so I'll get you a couple of questions here. So I'm going to throw a couple of questions to the audience, and I've got one of my own. So there's a question here. I don't know if this is but what back end or back end software do you use to collect data?
So when it comes to data, actually, with PC games, the Steam backend is amazing. I don't think enough people talk about it. There's so much stuff in the Steam backend. You can see up to date kind of just people viewing. We do use things like Google Analytics. So we've locked all the Google Analytics stuff in, and we kind of do use that. But in general, a combination of those two for PC really helps. On console, the kind of various backends have been getting a lot better as well. The Xbox backend in particular, they've got some great stats going on Xbox Live right now. But we otherwise we don't hook anything else crazy into it. It's literally just a case of kind of Google Analytics and the Steam backend essentially. So.
Hello, I'm back. My God.
Oh, you're back. I thought you disappeared.
Literally, we've been doing this for quite a while now. We used to do it every day, and that has not happened to me. It's the first time it's happened to me.
So I saw you disappear, and I was like, "Don't worry, I've got this."
I'm sorry about that. I just suddenly disappeared. Everything went offline. It's fine. It's a live show, folks. So that's good. But I think you sound like you got the end of the answer there. So well done.
Yes.
Yes. I've done that. I've got a quick question. Actually, I could use some more. People have asked questions. I should give them the credit.
Throw them at me.
How early should the developers be interacting with the audience in order to have a better success rate during launch? I think you mentioned you talked about starting to talk about one of your games like 6 or 12 months before.
Yeah, that's roughly. And the thing to kind of go deeper on that, it's a tricky question because it does. The unfortunate answer is it does kind of depend on the game. There's some games where. For like I was kind of just saying, we announced 4 to 6 months before, but then there are other games where you can afford to launch kind of a year before, and sometimes it actually makes sense to do that where it's a game that perhaps does need feedback from the audience a bit more. A kind of example is what we did with Descenders. We announced that 6 to 8 months before we launched it, but we did launch it into early access. A big reason why we did that is because we knew we had this cool downhill mountain biking thing, but if we were honest, we didn't 100% know what people were going to do with it yet. So by going and using early access, it allowed us to very early on see what people like. For example, predictably, people started screaming for multiplayer. So we eventually ended up adding that. But yeah, early access in particular, I think is something that can be used incredibly well for that kind of purpose, really.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions here to formats. One is, do you simultaneously launch on all platforms or staggered launch? And the other is, do you mostly focus on Steam or any other PC platforms that you care? Obviously, Epic Store is pretty huge these days. But
yeah, so we 100% stagger the launch. The reason we do that is because we will die otherwise. trying to launch on multiple platforms at the same time. I don't know what it's like on mobile, but on PC and console is the worst. The only time that we would launch on console at the same time as PC is if we had some kind of deal with a console platform, and that might well happen very soon. But without some kind of monetary deal, we go PC first. To be honest, I think it's the best idea anyway, because you put it out on PC, you get to see some of the feedback, you get to fix some things up, any bugs that that are kind of found can be fixed up, so that then when you do put it out on console, sort of 4 to 6 months later, it's the kind of perfect version of the game that console players are getting.
Okay, and final question from me, which is, you talk, obviously, most of what you're doing these days is in the PC space. There's quite a lot of money in mobile as well. There's quite a big audience. You have had some experience in mobile, so you've done stuff with us in the past, and you worked with Tiny Builder who do mobile.
Yes.
Have you ever considered looking back to mobile? And what, is there particularly anything you could bring back from your experiences in PC console launches into mobile space?
Yeah. It's a tricky one. I've been asked this a few times, and I've had so many conversations about this. Mobile for someone like us is tricky. Can you hear me? Oh, have you still got me? Oh, I don't know if Chris has just died. I'll keep talking. Can you hear me? Is it just Chris that's gone?
Can we all hear Mike?
Oh, you can hear me. Okay, good. Maybe we just lost Chris. Basically, we have looked into mobile. The problem with mobile for a publisher like us is that we do paid games, and I'm very much aware that free to play is kind of the king on mobile. We wouldn't really want to do free to play, partially because our games don't match that, and partially because I don't have the expertise in free to play. Now, if we were going to do paid on mobile, there's obviously issues there as well. For example, the lower prices on mobile. We charge sort of $20 on PC for our games. No one's going to buy our games for $20 on mobile. So we'd have to do sort of, between $5 to $8, I guess, on mobile, which is horrible and also devalues our titles. But also, it's not a secret as well that paid games don't particularly do great on mobile. So there's kind of a plethora of reasons. I think the only thing we would do is Apple Arcade. And we've talked to Apple a little bit about doing something like that. That makes more sense for us. We already do sort of.
You're not supposed to say that, Mike. That's the first rule of of working at Apple Arcade is you don't talk about Apple Arcade.
I'm sorry, I'll stop talking about it.
6 months on your notes now. I'm sure.
Well, we've done Xbox Game Pass, and that's gone well for us. A big reason why Xbox Game Pass has gone so well is because the number of players it drives into the game then leaks into the other platforms as well. People play the game on Xbox, and then they want to pick up the game on PC as well. They want to pay for it on PC. So there is the possibility of us doing Apple Arcade in the future. But in terms of just doing a straight up, kind of mobile ports for $5 to $8, I can't imagine we're going to be doing that anytime soon, to be honest.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, anyway, hopefully there's definitely some general information that's useful, whatever platform you're on. Thank you so much, Mike. Did very well in your first digital presentation. See how easy it is. You can do your conference you want to do now.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Thank you for a digital round of applause. I'm afraid it has to be in your head because you haven't yet. There's
always a digital round of applause.
Okay. Well, you've got a particularly big crescendo as you leave the stage. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thanks, Chris.
Cheers.